UFC 279 goes down on Saturday the 11th at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Nate Diaz and Khamzat Chimaev are up for a great clash, which could shock the UFC world. The MMA world is waiting to witness a mauling by the undefeated Chimeav, but are they right to think so? The man who has been on an absolute tear since he got to the UFC, running through all of his opponents with ease, with the exception of former title challenger Gilbert Burns, who dragged him into deep waters for the first time in his career. But in the strange and beautiful world of MMA, nothing is set in stone, and counting Nate Diaz out would be straight up dumb. The Stockton, California native isn't in the top 10, but he's one of the toughest fighters in the UFC, which is why Khamzat Chimaev agreed to fight him. Khamzat understands that a win over Diaz will not move him closer to a title shot, but it will demonstrate that he is one of the sport's baddest fighters and confirms he is a certified gangster-slayer after he destroys Diaz at UFC 279. Diaz is in the last fight of his contract, and many people believe the UFC gave him the worst matchup possible in order to bump Chimaev's stock up before Diaz rides off into the sunset. However, Diaz was ready to fight anyone who could help him get out of his contract. According to Dana White, Diaz was anything but picky, even offering to throw down with the heavyweight champ Francis Ngannou. Eventually, Dana set him up to fight Chimeav, who just revealed how he will destroy the old legend Diaz. So, what exactly does Khamzat have planned for Diaz this coming weekend? Are we in for a barn burner or an execution? Will Bohr's terrifying win streak continue, or can Diaz pull off one of the biggest upsets in UFC history? Let's find out. When asked about his upcoming fight by Sportskeeda.com during an interview after a Fight Club Rush event, Bohr's had a few things to say. Khamzat, who is 11-0 in MMA and 5-0 in the UFC, said he accepted the fight for fun and is looking forward to making mincemeat of Diaz when the cage door closes on September 10th. Khamzat said, "Actually, I don't need to fight that guy. I fight the guy just for fun. I was a kid when he was fighting. I could wait for the title. I took that fight. That guy is not top, but he's famous. Everyone loves him. Everyone talks about this gangster. I eat gangsters for breakfast. I'm gonna F that guy up." The UFC Hall of Famer and former two-division champion Georges St-Pierre was recently asked to comment on Khamzat Chimaev's main event fight against Nate Diaz, and St-Pierre anticipates that we'll see the best Chimeav yet. "This fight is at welterweight. The odds will be toward Chimeav. I think it favors him because of that," St-Pierre said this past weekend at a UFC Paris fan Q&A. However, Nate Diaz, you can't ever count him out. He's very well-rounded, he's very durable, and it will take a lot to try and put him away. But Khamzat, it's going to be a tough challenge because he only went the distance in his last fight, I believe, and I think he grew incredibly from that fight. He learned a lot. So I think we're going to see a better version of Khamzat, still better than what he was. So it's going to be an interesting fight. Chimeav has dominated all of his bouts since he got to the big stage, winning each of his first 5 fights with ferocious victories. With a gritty back-and-forth win over Gilbert Burns at UFC 273, the 28-year-old fighter cemented his place in welterweight title contention in April. The performance propelled Chimeav to the number 3 spot on MMA Fighting's welterweight rankings, and it convinced most of us of the Swedish fighter's potential. While 37-year-old Nate Diaz is a 7-1 underdog against Chimeav, he has been known to pull off major upsets at various points in his career. Diaz's dramatic comeback victory over Conor McGregor at UFC 196 changed the course of his career forever, and he came close to doing it again back in June 2021 when he hurt Leon Edwards pretty bad in the final minutes of a 25-minute fight. So will Diaz perform a miracle? Nate Diaz had a great performance when he fought Leon Edwards, St-Pierre said. He was losing the fight, but he finished very strong. He rocked Leon Edwards, and he had a very strong finish. It proves to us once again that it's never over until it's over, and anything can happen. And then we saw what happened the other last weekend with Edwards and Kamaru Usman at UFC 278, so anything can happen in this game. Needless to say, Nate's loss to Leon Edwards has aged very well if you consider the fact that Leon is now the welterweight champion of the world. So will Chimeav have an easy win? Khamzat Chimaev stands to gain far less with a victory than he did 2 weeks ago when Kamaru Usman was still the UFC welterweight champion. When this main event was scheduled, it seemed that Chimaev's victory would be a formality, and he would then be matched up with Usman in a welterweight title fight that would undoubtedly bring in big bucks for the UFC. But with less than a minute remaining in his rematch with Usman at UFC 278, Leon Edwards put an end to those plans with a head kick knockout heard around the world. With that upset, Edwards will almost certainly face Usman in an immediate rematch, leaving Chimeav in limbo regardless of the outcome. Although many expect an easy win for Chimeav, you can't ever leave out the old legend. Either way, we're in for a great show, and I, for one, can't wait for Saturday. Who do you think wins this high-profile welterweight showdown? Let me know in the comments section below.